the right of conquest. Here I'm definitely not speaking for Crisis Group. It's a whole series of legitimacies. On Cyprus, who is the legitimate owner of the sovereignty of Cyprus? It's right at the core of the problem of resolving Cyprus today. In effect, at the moment, you have two conquerors, right? You have the Greek Cypriots, who, without doubt, run their own affairs in the south of the island, and you have the Turkish Cypriots in the north, who do not really run their own affairs, but the Greek Cypriots certainly don't run them. And Turkey has a big influence over them, and it's definitely a separate jurisdiction. And I think in normal sort of rules of war terms, Turkey is responsible for North Cyprus because its army is in charge there. And one of the huge problems in fixing Cyprus is that Turkey doesn't recognize the Greek Cypriots in their current clothing as the Republic of Cyprus, and the Greek Cypriots will not theoretically enter full negotiations with Turkey until there is a settlement, i.e. until Turkish troops leave Cyprus. So you have a very complicated question over there. I think on the whole you are responsible for the area you control. Okay? And whether it's legitimate or not, you have obligations. You have responsibilities as an occupying army. And that's where it gets, you put a parallel to Israel. That's where it's a very interesting question. To what extent does Israel control the various bits of Israel? There's different things. You have lots of, and the consequences of Israeli perceptions of how it should control them also have a big impact on the Palestinian Arabs who are there in those places. For instance, a Palestinian Arab in Israel proper, if you like, pre-1967 Israel, has about 90% of the rights of a Jewish person in that same territory. And actually, if you notice, there's not much protest from that group usually, not always. You get the West Bank Palestinians the East Jerusalem Palestinians have about half of the rights of the average Israeli, and they too don't protest that much. They protest more than the Israeli Arabs, Palestinians, but as you get less rights in the West Bank and Gaza, where people are just jam-packed together in one of the most horrible places to live in the world, you get people who are desperate and angry. And yet Israel, it exercises many elements of the sovereign control of Gaza. For instance, it blocks the ports, it blocks the entryways, it controls the airspace, I wouldn't say it has a monopoly of the use of force, but it certainly has by far the strongest use of force. I mean, an F-16 fighter jet bombing a civilian neighborhood is about as extreme monopoly of force as you could get. People haven't really come to terms with that because, like on Cyprus, is a complication that the Israeli state views itself as a Jewish state. And as a Jewish state, you obviously can't, it does look very odd if the area you control as Israel is actually the West Bank and Gaza also under your control, really, physically. Nearly half the people in that geography are not Jewish. So it's a dilemma, it's a paradox, it's a contradiction which they're not ready to solve. And it's the same thing on Cyprus. The trouble is that human beings are vengeful, for instance, or idealistic, or whatever you like. The Cypriots, the Greek Cypriots, have the attitude sometimes of, well, if we can't have North Cyprus, then you can't have it either. That's a vengeful attitude. Okay? Or they have a legitimacy attitude. If we are recognized as the Republic of Cyprus, you are not, therefore you have to come and bend down before me and talk to me, even though you have 100 times more people, are far more powerful, and so forth and so on. So, unfortunately, I think I will weasel out on your question and just say it depends. Okay. Okay.